Hello class. Now, today we're looking at the levels of organization, okay? And our hello is to understand how living things are organized within an ecosystem. Now, before we continue, I want you to ensure you've got all your equipment with you, okay? So I need you to look around you, okay? Look at your table or look at your computer. Make sure you've got your pen, okay? You've got your green pen as well. You've got your ruler, you've got your pencil, you've got all your equipment with you. So what I would like you to do is to pause the video and ensure you've got all this. All right, welcome back. So like I said earlier, we're looking at the levels of organization, and our learning objective is to understand how living things are organized within an ecosystem. So what I would like you to do, like we always do, is to write down our learning objectives in our book. Okay, make sure you write your date, underline it neatly. Okay, can we move on? Brilliant. Now, I want us to answer these retrieval questions. Now, these are questions based on what we've done last lesson, okay? And the other lessons as well. I'll give us around 4 minutes, okay, to answer these questions, okay? So make sure you pause the video, and the challenge question as well. Make an attempt to also answer the challenge question. So pause the video and answer the question. All right, are we all done? Brilliant. So the question is asking, what is an adaptation? Give reasons why. One reason why an adaptation is important. What are the 3 categories of adaptation? What is an extremophile? And the challenge question is, how is a polar bear adapted for the Arctic? Now, what is an adaptation? First one, okay? Now, like we said last lesson, it's basically a special feature or a behavior that makes an organism suited to its habitat, okay? And that is why it's able to survive. Give one reasons why an adaptation is important. So one reason is more successful in competition, it increases survival and increases reproducing, okay? The fact that our population is growing on Earth is the fact that we are adapted to that environment, evidently, all right? So question 3 says, what are the 3 categories of adaptation? I hope you can remember that. So we've got the structural, we've got the behavioral, and we've got the functional. And then the last question is, what is an extremophile? Okay. Now, from last lesson, we said an extremophile is an organism that's adapted to live in an extreme conditions. Okay. Now, how many of us got all marks right? Full marks. I'm sure you did. Well done. If you haven't, that is fine. Just make sure you understand it now and you make those corrections. Okay. So the challenge question is, how is a polar bear adapted for the Arctic? So we've got things like the thick fur for warmth, thick fat layer for insulating, camouflage to help it catch prey so that it can be seen easily, claws and teeth to kill prey. Okay. Well done to everybody that have answered the questions and also the challenge questions. So like I said, we're looking at the levels of organization, and hopefully we can represent the feeding relationship within a community using a food chain, including the use of scientific terms to describe these relationships. Also, hopefully we can understand and interpret predator-prey cycle as well. You don't need to write this down, just make sure you've written down your learning objective. Now, the starter question, what do you think is wrong with this food chain? Now, this is actually showing a food chain, but what do you think is wrong with it? Take your time. I'll give you about just like 5 seconds to think about it. Aha, we're able to get it right. Yeah, it's really, really wrong. The arrows are not in the right position. That is not how the arrow is meant to be. So basically, this is how it should look, okay? Now, because the plant is a source of energy for the grasshopper is a source of energy for the mouse, and the mouse is a source of energy, okay, for the snake, and the snake is a source of energy for the hawk, okay? So the grasshopper eats the plant, the mouse eats the grasshopper, the snake hits the mouse, and the hawk eats the snake. Does that make sense? Okay, so this is how the arrow should look next time. Now, this is what we call food chains, okay? Food chain shows us the feeding relationship within a community. Now, the arrow shows which organism eats which other organism. But more importantly, okay, it shows the direction of energy transfer within a food chain. So the plant's energy is transferred to the grasshopper, the plant grasshopper's energy is transferred to the mouse, and then vice versa to the snake and to the hawk. Okay, does that make sense? Take your time to get it. Okay, if you do not get it, you can always go back in the video and have a look again and listen. All right. Now, to be more realistic though, food chain should actually look more like this. Yes, we get energy from the sun as well. Okay, solar energy. Okay, and looking at it, the process of photosynthesis takes place where it actually uses the sun as well, and this is how it just goes. All right, more likely it's like a circle, really. Now, what I want you to do is to think about, obviously there's nobody with you, there's probably somebody with you, but probably not anyone with you. But I'd like you to think why you think the sun is one of the most important parts of any food chain. Think about it. Yeah, the sun is very important. Now, let's have a look. Now, what's interesting, like I said, is the sun provides energy, okay, so that green plants and algae can perform photosynthesis. Now, during photosynthesis, glucose molecules are produced inside the plant or algae, right? Now, this is why we call plants producers, as they provide the biomass of all life on Earth. So when you say biomass, that is food for the next level in the food chain, okay? So the sun is extremely important, okay, in relating with the plants. Now, let's look at the ranking of consumers, okay? Consumers eat plants or animals or both. A food chain can be used to rank different types of consumers. For example, okay, the seaweed, and then the limpets, okay, the crab and the humans, okay? Now, we know that the seaweed consumer is the limpet. We know that the limpet consumer is the crab, and the crab consumer is humans, okay? If that makes absolute sense. Now, well, that is the producer. That is the primary consumer, secondary consumer, and the tertiary consumer. Does that make sense again? Okay? When we relate it to each other, we realize that we've got different levels of consumer. The very, very first consumer is limpet. The second consumer is the secondary consumer, the crab, and the tertiary consumer is the human. So there's that energy transfer, and eventually we get to the human, if that makes sense. Okay, so producers basically make their own food. For example, plants, the seaweed, it makes its own food through the process of photosynthesis, and then the primary consumer eats producers, secondary consumer eats primary consumers, and tertiary consumers eat secondary consumers. Okay, now this is not working, but we're going to skip it, but it's pretty much explaining the whole idea as well. How moths actually feed on the tree, the blue tit feed on the moth, and the owl feed on, well, interesting enough, the blue tit as well. Okay, now this is actually a BBC bite-sized information and a video for you to watch. Take your time, during your own time, or you could pause the video now and actually watch it to understand the predator and prey relationship. Okay, now we're looking at competitions and population size. Okay, now the size of a population varies due to the factors such as disease, migration, and predation. Okay, that is why a lot of people do migrate all the time. People give birth as well, and the population changes. Okay, now competition generally has a stabilizing effect on the population, and the question is, why is this? Okay, now let's look at it. Population rises. Okay, and because the population rises, there's more competition. The population falls, and once the population falls, there's less competition, and then the population rises again. If that makes sense. The fact that there's less competition means less animals are dying and are reproducing more. And this is actually a circle, and this is what continually happens every time. Now, these are typical some exam questions, and this is asking to describe what happens when the snowshoe hares and the lynx population and explain why it happens. Okay, so have a look and see the relationship between what's happening there. Okay, one is the predator, one is the prey. All right, I'll give you some time. Make sure you pause the video and think about it. All right, so the question is asking us again to describe what happens to the snowshoe hares and the lynx population and explain why it happens. So let's look at the first one. Okay, we've got more hares at this time, and this allows lynx to survive. Okay, she's able to feed on it. Now, as the population of the hares decreases, as it's decreasing, you can see that the population of the lynx actually decreases as well. All right, does that make sense? So they starve or they leave the area to find something to eat. Does that make sense? Now, what I'd like you to do, okay, is to actually complete the exam question. Okay, some of the resources we've given you content exam question as well. I'd like you to answer the exam questions. Okay, take your time. We've also provided you with the mark scheme which you can use later. Like I said, you're doing it on your own. Make sure you do it by yourself and not copy answers because you're not helping yourself. Okay, so take your time, answer the exam questions, all right, and mark it as well. But what we've been able to do is you should be able to have been able to represent the feeding relationship within a community using a food chain, including the use of scientific terms to describe these relationships. Hopefully, you're able to understand and interpret the prey-predator cycle based on the videos and the previously baptized you've looked at. All right, just make sure you answer the questions. Feel free to email us if you've got questions and things that you do not understand, and the best of luck.